So Vishal, Andy, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So I understand there's been a big announcement between Protiviti and Appway. Both companies have partnered to ultimately help automate the KYC process and support anti-money laundering policies and procedures. So Vishal, talk to me about this partnership a little bit.
Yeah, no, thanks a lot. We are really excited about this partnership. There's definitely a problem in the industry right now, which is a lot of the KYC, AML related work is extremely manual. Ever since the regulations came about, a lot of the banks have basically thrown people at the problem, and that's grown exponentially, right? What it's done is it's created a lot of manual work. The knowledge workers are working more as collecting data, and they've become data gatherers. We saw this as a problem in the industry. We worked with Appway because of their lovely orchestration platform that they have, and our goal was really to create an end-to-end process flow that is digital, and it could be leveraged by all the banks to really solve for their KYC periodic review problem, and that's really a starting point.
Yeah, and I think from the Appway perspective, we've been working with banks for 15 years and helping them solve some of these problems on an individual basis, but bringing the power of Protiviti into the equation and their experience across such a broad range of banks and their issues with KYC, I think allows the two of us to get to a really best-in-class solution.
So ultimately then, what challenge is this partnership solving for within the industry? Obviously automation is a big part of it, but what else?
Yeah, so 80% of the work that's really done in the KYC process is manual. If I could sort of talk about the process flow for a second, typically what happens is investigators go in and they log into 15 to 16 different systems, pull data from all of those different systems, put it in an Excel spreadsheet, then they start analyzing it, and they create a Word document, which is really the analysis that they have to create. And in instances, they have to send it to other partners within the bank to get more information on the customer. And then they have to go to external systems to find out if there's anything negative about that particular customer that they're trying to investigate. If you really think about this, there's absolutely no efficiencies and no reasons for going through all of these processes.
No, it seems completely fragmented.
Completely fragmented.
And it's even worse when you think about it, because these are expensive knowledge workers and they're spending their time as if they were 18th century scriveners.
Right, right. So if you put all of this together, the amount of time it's actually taking for banks to actually clear this is ridiculous, right? And as I mentioned earlier, the best solution that they have come up with so far is how many more people do we need to actually solve for this problem, right? So I wouldn't necessarily call this as a automation tool as much as it is a digital transformation in sort of the KYC space, and trying to come up with new ways and better ways for banks to be more effective and use their money more wisely.
That's right. And if you think about the risks that they face in this space, any one of these kinds of issues where there's a failure leads to very significant fines and penalties from the regulators. So if you can't control it and you don't have the visibility into it, you really are raising your risk level significantly.
Absolutely. And in terms of the overall experience, for clients, what does this look like now then?
Yeah, so imagine a world where you would come to work and not have to really do most of the mundane tasks. It's really sort of leveraging a playbook from whether it's Uber or any of the other disruptions that have come about in the marketplace. And really we're taking a step back and saying, how can we think digital in sort of the banking space, right? And it's not just the front lines, but it's also the second lines, i.e. compliance and risk, which can benefit by some of these innovations. Another good example is today when you have to go and get external data, you're sort of using emails to go and ask for that information, and it could very easily get lost in the shuffle. But using a platform such as Appway, which has a case management tool attached to it, you don't need to use emails anymore, and you could actually be more sort of streamlined in getting the data as well.
And I would imagine more secure too, right?
Absolutely, and also think about it from the standpoint of supervision. So you know where you're missing information. You as a manager know who in your group is behind. You know where you have risks because you have an enhanced due diligence client who's behind schedule. So all those things are there right at your fingertips. And I don't think in today's environment that exists.
Absolutely. And as we see banks evolve and really try to keep up with the ever-changing digital landscape, are both of you hopeful that we'll eventually get there as an industry? You know, these banks won't be scared of these digital transformations and will be more eager to take on these technology stacks?
Yeah, so I think this is version 1.0 of what we're trying to release in this marketplace. And the reason I say that is because the concept of using a tool and an orchestration platform is not just restricted only to KYC. I can see this in all of the other AML apparatus, like whether it's sanction screening or whether it is transaction monitoring, but even beyond that, in other compliance functions such as fair lending, where you actually need to collect data, you need to go and figure out how are you actually resolving a problem. This particular process can really be used in multiple areas.
Yeah, and I think the power that Appway brings to the process is that you can also use it across multiple geographies. So with some of Protiviti's clients, you're looking at folks who are global banks, and they're dealing with different regulations in different jurisdictions. And so bringing this to the table allows them by business rule to be secure, safe, and design the compliance into the process wherever they happen to be operating in the world.
And Vishal, you mentioned this is version 1.0, but what's next for this space? What kind of has you excited, maybe even a little nervous? What are your hopes?
Yeah, no, so what's really exciting is we are at that pivotal point, and it's evident by being in this conference as well. There's so much of talk about digital, right? And sort of going on this transformative journey, which is relatively new for banking. Banking have typically been very conservative. But what we're seeing is there's definitely threats coming in from the new banks or the challenger banks who are born digital. And existing banks have to adopt to these new technologies to be competitive, because these born digital new banks, challenger banks, are actually doing all the things that we are talking about. And if the traditional banks don't get onto the bandwagon, they'll be left behind. So there's definitely an opportunity here for them to start thinking digital. And I think between Protiviti partnership with Appway, we are trying to sort of peel that onion layer by layer.
That's right. I think it's a step in the journey. It's a long journey. They need to do it fairly quickly, though, because it's not even just the challenger banks, right? If I'm the president of a bank today, I'm not just worried about them. I'm worried about Apple. I'm worried about Google, right? I'm worried about Amazon. Those are the things that I think are keeping me up at night, because there are head starts there that if I don't get to it right now, I'm going to have a hard time ever making up the ground on.
Absolutely. Well, exciting times for you both. Congratulations on the partnership, and thank you both so much for your insights.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
From Medici Studio, I'm Shannon Rossick.